Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael and we're going to be getting right back into some more Reddit stories. If you enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Now, without further ado, let's begin. This story was posted by a user named Material Pair in the AITAH subreddit. The post is titled AITAH for not letting my husband control the money in our house. My husband and I have been married for over a year. He knows what I make hourly, but I don't just hand money over to him. Backstory. 10 years ago, my children's father took control of my bank account and income, spent my savings, and gave me an allowance of $50 a week from my paycheck. This had to cover gas, groceries, and diapers. I gave birth to our second child a year and a half later and would walk to the store so I would have gas for work. One day, I had to make a decision about buying diapers for my oldest child or my newborn. I cried in the diaper section because I couldn't believe my life had gotten to this point. I'll never forget the kind person who purchased the diapers for my children and gave me extra money to hide. When I got home, I was belittled and accused of stealing money to buy so much. When I explained that $50 a week for 4 of us, including diapers, wasn't enough, he told me to figure it out. I asked for $100 a week. Eventually, I convinced him to allow me more money. 3 months later, I left and swore I'd never allow another man to do that again. Present day. Fast forward 10 years. My husband was fully aware that I came with about $18,000 in credit card debt. I've successfully paid almost all of it in full over the past 2 years. I am responsible for groceries for our family of 5, the phone bill for us, and car insurance. I have my car payment and 1 credit card. My husband pays the utilities and the house payment. We recently purchased a new-to-us camper. He took out a loan on it and put the money I received from my totaled camper in the bank, so he has that as well as his vehicle payment. He says I should be giving him $300 or more a month for savings and to help with utilities, but I won't. If something happens to him, I can't access that account to pay bills, etc. I don't believe I'm on his account at all. I opened an account 5 months ago and have $250 from each paycheck placed into it for safekeeping. I also need to buy school supplies, kids' clothes, etc. His ex-wife shares costs 50-50 for their daughter, but my ex and I are not on those types of terms. My husband gets frustrated that my situation isn't like his, but I told him it is what it is. Every pay period, he asks me for money for utilities, and I brush it off or say that if he buys groceries, then sure. He claims that I don't know how to save money and thinks he should have what is left of my paycheck each week for vacations, going out to dinner, etc. I won't do it. The mere thought of having an allowance again terrifies me. Do I overspend some weeks? Yes, but I don't use a credit card to buy items anymore. I don't rob Peter to pay Paul like I did in 2020. I budget right down to using coupons for groceries and calculating what my grocery bill will be before entering the store. He says I need to trust him and let him hold on to all of our money together because his savings account is also mine. However, I just can't bring myself to do this unless I can have full access to the account as well. I don't see that being an option. He recently sold a vehicle and put $16,000 in savings while giving me $1,000 to spend on whatever I wanted. So I put $200 in the bank, bought each of my kids one Christmas gift early, ordered myself new glasses and contacts. When I wanted a hoodie for $20, he asked if I'd already spent the money he gave me. When I said, kind of, he said he wasn't buying the hoodie because he thought I'm irresponsible with money and regretted giving me the $1,000. He even asked for receipts for everything I'd bought. He knew about my visit to the eye doctor. He knew how much I'd paid. He knew about the gifts I'd gotten because I'd saved more than I'd spent on Christmas gifts. He's been very pushy about holding all the money, and his friends are beginning to make comments about it. They tell me I need to pay when we go out for drinks and insist that I pull out my debit card to pay the tab. I probably have $10,000 in the bank. I leave the tip. I don't drink when we go out aside from water. Occasionally I will have a sip, but I won't risk a DUI. I tip because the bartenders are usually really good at making sure my water is full all the time and I never go without it, so I take care of them. Am I the jerk for not letting my husband have control of all the money? Edit. I want to be clear that the debt I acquired and had when we moved in together was from a past relationship, taking a huge pay cut, and COVID-19. During COVID, my income was severely impacted. I hardly worked and was continuously looking for work while homeschooling both my kids. I was robbing Peter to pay Paul, and my ex-boyfriend who lived with me didn't want to help with anything and was a huge financial burden. I had to get that situation under control. Edit 2, our incomes are currently similar. In January, I was put up for a promotion, and once my training is complete, my monthly income will be 1.5 times more than his current monthly income. Based on his base pay, my current income is about $6K a year, less than his annually, but can go up to $20K more with overtime. Edit 3. His bills amount to roughly $700 a month. The house payment is $400, leaving $300 for gas, water, and electricity. As for mine, car insurance is about $250 a month. Last month it was $337. My phone bill is just over $264 and includes internet. My grocery expenses range weekly from $200 to $400 depending on produce and meat purchases, which is a big reason why I haven't been helping with household bills. I also pay for all streaming services, which can be quite expensive too. User Wrong Moose said, "Hell no, you're not the jerk. I walked away from a similar situation that you had with your ex. Your current husband sounds like his true colors are starting to show. Be careful. Good luck." To this, a user named Known Quantity said, "My first husband made me account for every penny, requiring receipts for everything. I never realized how naive I was until I was talking to a coworker. They asked me why I had no money while I was working, but he was sitting at home unemployed because he couldn't find a job he liked." User No Addition said, "I feel your new husband is trying to be financially abusive toward you. I'm on a bank account with my partner. My partner was going to give me access to everything in all his accounts, but the bank employee carefully cautioned him against that. I don't have an allowance. I spend what I need to spend. Usually, I will ask if it's okay if I'm going on a shopping spree, but over the years, I've been very conservative with my spending. I'm concerned you may be getting yourself into a similar situation with your current husband. He's trying to withhold access to the money that you earn. He is accusing you of being financially irresponsible and trying to make you pay all the time when you go out. That is abusive. There's no reason for you not to have access to your own money. Your current husband is waving a massive red flag." To this, OP said, "He says it is part of being married. My sister has been married for 20 years and they don't share bank accounts. To me, having separate accounts is normal. I have never been married before." He's also made a comment about how not allowing him access to my money means I'm hiding what I have so I can plan to leave in the future. Update. I took some of your previous suggestions. I asked him to go to marriage counseling, but he declined because he didn't have any issues in our marriage except for me. I suggested a joint bank account for bills only, while we would keep separate accounts for our savings. This argument was pretty much the end of our marriage for me. I opened my own savings account at a different bank than the one I was currently using. I didn't have a debit card, so if I needed to withdraw money, I had to physically go to the bank. I picked up side cleaning jobs for spending money so I wouldn't have to touch either account I had. We went to a sporting event with our children. After the event, the kids wanted fast food, which was fine by me since it was late and I didn't want to cook. He asked me when we won the lottery, and I told him I didn't feel like cooking, so it was fine, and handed him $20. 3 days later, when I went to work, he apparently had other plans for the money in his account that he wanted me to contribute to. When I came home, there was the ugliest car in our driveway. He wasn't home, he was at the bar, so when he pulled into the driveway, I pretended to be sleeping so I wouldn't blow up at him that night. Since he had been drinking for 5 hours, I knew it wasn't the best idea anyway. He was mad at me when I woke up in the morning because I didn't say goodnight to him and had fallen asleep by the time he got home. He said I didn't have to worry because he was going to take out a loan on the car to put the money back in his savings account. The same thing he did with the camper when I gave him money for it. Had I actually given him money to put in the savings account, it wasn't our money. It was his money. Financial decisions were his and his alone, apparently. I started looking for an apartment when I got to work, and within 3 hours, I was signing paperwork and getting a cashier's check for a security deposit. I told him the day before I was moving that I was leaving, and he asked me how I could do this without talking to him. I said, "Well, you bought a car without discussing it with me first, so I got an apartment without your permission." I filed for divorce on my birthday. I've been called a gold digger, accused of having an affair, and blamed for his current financial problems. I practically paid for the camper, but he decided to take out a loan on it to have money in his savings account. He doesn't want it anymore and said I have to pay for the cost of the loan to get it out from under him, but I don't see why I should have to. Since I gave him cash, I don't have a record of what it was for when I gave him the money, nor did he ever put it in the bank after I gave it to him. So if I want the camper, I don't really have a choice but to do it. He's asked for cash for the camper, and I literally laughed out loud at him. I told him I did that once already, and I'm not doing it again or paying any additional costs. He calls me asking for the truth about whether I was really cheating on him and if that was why I left because I wasn't watering his garden. I told him marriages end for many reasons, not just affairs, and suggested he seek therapy because he has a lot of unresolved issues from his previous marriages if he assumes I cheated on him. I'm getting a divorce. After the divorce, I'll be looking to purchase my own home and have absolutely no contact with him. My children and I are thriving already in our little apartment, and I'm managing my money very well. He wanted someone to depend on him and need him. That just wasn't me. This next post was made in the same subreddit by a user named Sweetie Beanie. The post is titled AITAH for leaving my husband after years of putting his friends and family above me, then finding out he might not even want our baby. Evan, since I know you might see this, I know you'll probably say I'm overreacting, but by the time you read this, it's too late. I've already left and made arrangements with a lawyer. Context: I married Evan 5 years ago. We've been together for about 8 years. For the first couple of years, I honestly thought I'd hit the jackpot. He was attentive, thoughtful, and supportive, or so I thought. But as time went on, he slowly became more and more absent, putting his friends and family before me in every way possible. Background: Evan has this group of friends he's known since high school. They hang out constantly, and he's made it clear that they come first, even when it interferes with our life together. We'd have plans and he'd cancel at the last minute because they needed him for some urgent video game session or to help out. I didn't think much of it at first, but it got to the point where I realized I was always taking a back seat. Then there's his mom, who's difficult, to put it lightly. She's never liked me, and Evan has never defended me or set any boundaries. When she told me I wasn't good enough for her son at our engagement party, he laughed it off. At our wedding, she accidentally got into a fight with me over a small detail about our ceremony and has constantly undermined me since then. The final straw: I'm currently 6 months pregnant with our first child. Recently, Evan sat me down to tell me he's not sure he's ready for the responsibility of a baby. When I told him it was a little late for second thoughts, he got defensive, saying he wasn't convinced this was the right time and that I was putting too much pressure on him. He mentioned he'd talked it over with his friends and they all agreed he was just being honest. That's when I realized that in his mind, their opinion mattered more than his family, more than us. The last straw came a week ago. I had a small health scare and he didn't even show up because he was busy with his friends. That night I realized I couldn't rely on him and I didn't want my child growing up in an environment where their father wasn't present and prioritized everyone else over them. So I packed my bags and left. I'm staying with a friend for now and I've made arrangements to file for divorce. I'm ready to build a life on my own for me and my baby, even if it hurts like hell. Usercat LolaFat said, if it makes you happy. My cousin was like your husband. If his friends needed anything, he would ditch his significant other in a heartbeat. He had a great girlfriend that we all loved, but his friends told him to dump her since she called them out on their nonsense. She ended the relationship because, according to her, she wanted an adult, not a child. What happened was that all his friends got married and the group broke up because the biggest jerk of the group stood up for their girlfriend. Now my cousin realizes how toxic this friend group was. His ex met someone else and has been married for over 8 years. To this day, he regrets listening to his old friends. It's been over 12 years. User Inevitable Divide said, it takes 2 to make a baby the last time I checked. Since he was involved in creating the baby, he needs to step up and take responsibility for his child. If he doesn't think that he is father material, no problem, he will have to pay child support once the baby is born. Maybe his friends can help him with that too. You deserve better than this immature idiot. This final post was made in the same subreddit by a throwaway account. The post is titled AITAH for punishing my son harshly for a prank on a vulnerable person. I have a son, Jack, and a daughter, Alyssa, and I am married to Tom. Tom is Alyssa's father, but Jack's father is my ex-husband, Dan. Dan and I had a pretty ugly custody fight, and he lives in New York while we live in Texas. Over the years, Dan has unsuccessfully tried to get Jack to move in with him. It wasn't easy to fend him off since he is a very successful lawyer. Jack is a pretty popular kid in school. His friends on the wrestling team came up with a prank for him to ask a heavily autistic girl who had a crush on him to the prom as a joke, and for him to show up wearing a gorilla suit. Jack originally said no, but the wrestling team actually raised a fund that ended up being somewhat north of $800 for him to do it, and they paid for the gorilla suit. Jack agreed. If it matters, this is very out of character for him. After the prom, I was looking around on Instagram and saw pictures of him in the gorilla suit. I was surprised that he didn't take his girlfriend, Jess. After reading the comments, I learned what happened. To say I was furious doesn't even begin to describe it. I woke Jack up as soon as I saw it and screamed at him until my lungs gave out. Then, when Tom heard what was going on, he joined in. Tom and Jack have never gotten along. I can't prove it, but I suspect Jack's father, Dan, has a hand in that. Jack told Tom, "Screw off, I'm talking to my mother." So, we took away all of Jack's electronics and his phone. We had also paid for a car as his graduation present, but because of his prank and disrespect toward Tom, we instead gave it to Alyssa. We also forced him to give us the $800 that was raised for the prank, gave it to his date, and made him write a letter of apology. He was grounded for a month, and we canceled his 18th birthday party. When Jack's birthday came, there was a knock at the door. It was Dan with suitcases. Tom said, "What is this? The custody agreement says you don't get him on this birthday." Dan just looked past Tom and said, "Hey kid, I'm here for the jailbreak." He then pointed at a Mustang and said, "Hope you like Fords. You can practice driving your new car on a road trip back to NY. Let's take a detour to NOLA." The two of them were laughing, high-fiving, and backslapping as they ignored us while we tried to intervene. The only time Dan acknowledged me was to look me in the eye and say coldly, "Checkmate," while Jack yelled as they were driving off, "Screw off, Tom." Since then, Jack has gone completely no contact with me. He talks a little bit to Alyssa, and from what little she tells me, he's doing well. Dan is giving him the royal treatment, bringing him to steakhouses, Yankees games, and just giving him outright cash. It has been almost a year since this happened, and I'm going crazy thinking I've lost my son. So am I the jerk? Edit, I see there is some confusion about whether Alyssa is my biological daughter or stepdaughter. She is my stepdaughter. We really have a mother-daughter relationship to the point where it doesn't even occur to me to call her my stepdaughter. At the risk of understatement, Jack never warmed up to Tom in the same way. Update. On the advice of some of the posters, I reached out to Dan to see if he would be willing to consider brokering peace between me and Jack. About a week later, I got a response telling me to meet him, Jack, Jack's girlfriend Jess, and his friend from a past firm, Jonathan, at a cafe in Manhattan. He arranged a 6 a.m. flight and put me in a dodgy hotel in probably the most dangerous neighborhood in NYC. I arrived and saw Dan, Jack, Jess, and Jonathan. I noticed Jess had an engagement ring on her finger. Jonathan said Jack has a claim against me for stealing the $840, and until that is resolved, I am not to contact him, but only to contact Jonathan. I told Jonathan that was the money his friends paid him for the prank, and that I gave it to the girl. Jonathan said he was aware of the circumstances, but nonetheless it wasn't my money, and under the law it was considered theft. Jack has a legal claim against me. I said I didn't care if it was against the law. Jack had no right to that money, and they could sue me if they wanted. Jack said, "You locked me up in my room like a prisoner for a month, took the car bought for me with dad's child support money, took the money, and berated me for hours on end. Unless you're going to give me the car, this is the only thing you can undo. You said you wished we could have handled it better, so here is your chance." Or was that just bullshit lip service? I told him I was sorry, but I couldn't do it. Jonathan then gave me a cease and desist letter telling me not to contact Jack and to address all communication to Jonathan. Then Jack and Jess left, and I asked Dan if he could talk for a minute. I asked him if he brought me there to humiliate me, and he said actually no, he didn't. He brought me so I could humiliate myself. He'd actually worked very hard to get Jack to the point where he'd be open to talking to me again if I were willing to back down just a little. But since he knew that if I had to choose between my indignation and my own son, I'd choose my indignation every time, just like I did in our marriage. I asked him why he'd put us all through that. He said it was because a part of him wondered if I'd ever learn to pick love over anger. He bet his future that I wouldn't when he divorced me. So he had to see for himself how it actually turned out after all these years later. I asked him if Jack was just a pawn in his game. He said no. If I actually would have picked Jack, he'd be with me now and there would have been nothing anyone could have done to stop it. But instead, my indignation over a stranger was more important to me than learning to move on with my own son. I asked him, what about the girl? He then said, "I hope she'll be a wonderful daughter to you since you lost a son for her." I told him I didn't know the girl. Then he said, "Sounds like a bad trade," and left. Also, I'm apparently not invited to Jack's wedding. User Fuzzy Tutor said, YTA for the fact that you felt a custody agreement meant anything on an 18-year-old's birthday. Taking away a graduation gift and giving it to your other child is also really unfair. What does Alyssa's mother have to say about this stunt you pulled? User Background Owl said, every step-parent relationship is different. What people don't realize is that your child may not like something you say, but at the end of the day, you and your mom will work it out. However, your husband, as his stepfather, can't say the same things. He just can't. I make it a rule not to correct my stepchild if his parent is in the room. It's not my job. Your husband walked into a situation you were handling and joined in. That was unnecessary. You took gifts away from one child and gave them to his stepsister. How do you reward a child for another child's misdeeds? It doesn't even make sense. So your question isn't fair. He needed to be punished for what he did. What he did was awful. Did he need his stepfather joining in on the tirade? No. Did his stepsister deserve his gifts? No. There is so much wrong here.